I had the blessing of a holiday in sunny Croatia last week and was, as you might well imagine, every inch the very awkward English guy, the English guy abroad, not speaking the language, pointing at things, desperately trying not to point at things, but just inevitably pointing at things, trying not to shout, but occasionally shouting, getting grumpy dad sort of things, apologizing for everything, desperate not to blend in, and yet screaming tourist at the same time. Don't know if you do that when you go on holiday. 2 travel tips. I had a brief look at the Croatia travel guide before we left, and these were tips that saved me, so I'm going to share them with you for when you go, or just as general life lessons. The first one, don't wade into the water without knowing about the painful sea urchins. That's the first one. So we didn't do that. The second one, more critically, even than that, don't wade into conversation without knowing about the region's painful, complex past. Don't be an ignoramus. Don't be a arrogant British dude abroad. Show some consideration, that kind of thing. Don't be ignorant. So on the back of that, just before we set off to travel, I looked into it, and I kind of knew a little bit about the former Yugoslavia, but there is so much hate, so much hurt, lots of violence, a lot of chaos. That would be the word that I think best describes that region through some of the tough times, chaos. And it left, and this was the little stat as I Googled it that sort of stuck with me enough to get into the preach, I guess. It left 3.7 million people in the wrong place in their own country. 3.7 million people in their own country were in the wrong place, and they became refugees in their own country, and it kind of blew me away. So I've got a quote as I sort of dug around. There's a guy called Alexander Heman. He's a Bosnian guy, an author, who sort of writes about this sort of stuff, and it helps us just sort of think through that predicament. Being a refugee, he says, it's not a choice. It's a form of chaos in your life you didn't plan for, that nobody plans for. That's the way that he described all of the unfolding events in the former Yugoslavia. Chaos grabbed him. At the same time as I was on holiday in sunny Croatia, I was reading a book. It's on the chair over there. I meant to bring it up with me. It's called Aftermath: Life After the Third Reich in Germany. And I know what you're thinking. You're a real hoot on holiday. It's true. I am something very fun when I get away on holiday. Aftermath: Life After the Third Reich. One of the biggest comments in this not so fun book was that the biggest problem facing Germany, and actually most of Europe at that time, on day zero they called it, as the war, Second World War was ending, was millions, 60 million some estimates are, of people in their own country in the wrong place. Displaced people. People who just became refugees, had no home because they were swamped up in what? In the chaos of war. Now, I need to be smart about what I say about this stuff, I think. Smart as I can manage. There's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of strong rhetoric and emotion around people in transit, isn't there? That we hear all of the time. We maybe even give it out some of the time. So much rhetoric, so much emotive rhetoric, I'd say it's hard to often know what you actually think about any of it. It's hard to know what the truth is underneath it, and it's clear that there's lots for us as a culture to think about. But I think safe to say, given that little disclaimer at the start, that chaos, given the history of the world that we look at, chaos could catch anybody out. None of us are immune from this idea of chaos. Chaos is all around. One of the overlooked themes of the Bible, I think, overlooked, maybe that's not quite right, maybe it's not a theme that springs readily to mind about the Bible, is all of the refugees, all of the people in transit, all of the people, perhaps it's better to say it like this, perhaps this is more familiar language to us, all of the people searching for home. You stop and look at the Bible, And it's not a little sidebar of a theme. It's actually a huge theme that runs right the way through the Bible story. So you could start in the Old Testament, and you've got the story of the Exodus. And scholars would make the case to say that's the biggest story in the Old Testament. You might want to argue about that, but you might well make a case to say that it's the biggest story in the Old Testament. And if you read through the New Testament, the post-Jesus part of the Bible, all of the major writers reference the Old Testament, the Exodus of people. They all mention it quite frequently, and they all align it up with the work, the need of the people, and the saving work of Jesus. It's a huge theme. So I think God's word teaches us quite practically to notice and care for the lost and the homeless. It's quite practical about that. I think Jesus does that as well. Notice this. See this storyline, have your heart moved by this, but that's not all that the Bible does, I don't think. More than that, what the Bible actually says is, we're all refugees. This story should connect with us, not just because we're trying to be moral people who look out for people, but because it chimes with us. It chimes with our story. One of the subtler told Bible narratives is actually, underneath it all, we are all searching for home. We're all looking for home. I have loved the theme of leisure. I think it's really important to think about what we do with our spare time. We've tried to be quite creative with this series. We've tried to think about something that you're engaged with, to maximize your life, all that kind of stuff. But there is a reality, I think, when we think about leisure, that struck me as I prepared for like the last talk on the series, that for lots of people, lots of perhaps refugees, but loads of other people, that this idea of leisure is just impossible. Chaos invades us. It's meant that some people just cannot settle. They just don't have any time. They just don't have any money to have any leisure. They literally can't stop worrying because there's so much for them to worry about. So what can we say about that? How can we wrap up this series? I don't know about you, but when this is almost a confession, when I watch stories of refugees on the television, on the news, as I've said a billion times, I sit down and watch the 10 o'clock news for my crimes, and I don't know, is blasé the right word? You see these pictures with such frequency of people on the road with nothing, and I can sort of watch it just as television. I can kind of switch off from it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe if I saw it for the very first time, my heart would burst and I'd be like, oh my word, is this really happening? And now I watch it and I can just sort of consume it because we're flooded with it. The other night I was re-pulled in. My heart still beats. Reconnected again. And the reconnection point was, it was two pictures. One picture of a guy's home as it was, the rubble of it, but that was not the picture that he was looking at. The picture that he was looking at was in his pocket. And it was his home as it was. Gardens, kids playing, sun shining, vines, all of this kind of stuff. And that is what he held on the road. And that is what he would not let go of. We can see, as we look, the rubble and the ruin. And yet he was still holding on to the kids playing and the vines. And he wasn't going to let go of that on his journey. That was his aim. That was what kept him. He was kept by a picture of home. How it was, and I pick these words as carefully as I can, how it was and how it should be. Maya Angelou says that the ache for home lives in all of us. I think that's true. I think we all have an ache for home. What is Revelation 21 verse 1 to 7 about? What has it got to do with anything that I've just said in the first couple of minutes of this talk? I think this is what it is. I think that passage there, and there's other bits of the Bible that I would say are the same thing as this, but this is a really gorgeous passage. This is, in the chaos, the picture of home that we can hold to get us through. We are all pilgrims, is my conviction. I'd scream it at you if it wouldn't mean that you'd all leave. We're all pilgrims. We're all sojourners. We're all refugees, longing for home. And there is a picture of it that I think we actually know. I think our heart sort of bleeds it. We connect with it. We don't drop it. We hang on to it. The same way as the guy on the road hung on to his picture of home. There are things about how this world could be and should be that we will not drop, that we will hang on to. So there's three, as is my way, there's three things in this text that I think this picture helps us sort of hold onto. The first one, hope these are really helpful. Hope they help us in the chaos or with chaos on the horizon. First one in the text, verse 1 is, I think this picture shows us the way through chaos. We see through the chaos. There is a new heaven and a new earth. Then there's a curveball. And there's no sea, which for the formative years of my life I was quite depressed about. I thought, I really want to go to heaven, but I do like the sea. Hell sounds terrifying, but I do like the sea. Probably shouldn't be jokey about that kind of thing. There's a new heaven and a new earth and no sea. The sea, hopefully I'll explain this best I can, is not sea, but it is representative of chaos. Revelation, if you flick through the book, is full of imagery and symbolism all the way through. And you've got to be really careful as you read it, and you've got to try and work with it. But especially in ancient Near Eastern culture, the idea of the sea is synonymous with the idea of chaos. It's not the best example in the world, but my mum, when it's busy, always says it's like Briggate Station in here. I don't even know where Briggate Station is. Don't even know if it's a thing. But she never says, I'm busy. It's really busy. It's overcrowded. She says, it's like Briggate Station. It's synonymous with the idea of being busy. And the idea of sea and chaos is that similar connection. It's like the sea. Chaos. And maybe you can imagine 2,000 years ago, without the legendary David Attenborough explaining everything to us through his great documentaries, if we just saw some of these fish are absolutely crackers, aren't they, that you see? Like one eye, made of jelly, might sting you, might be your best friend. You've got no blooming idea what's going to come out of the ocean. If you lived a couple of thousand years ago, you'd be like, that is chaos. What the heck is that? Think carefully before you go into that chaos and into the sea. Or you heard about a ship that sunk because it disappeared into a whirlwind. What the heck is that? It's chaos. And that was the language that was familiar in the ancient Near East. Lots of life, I think, with that in mind, we can't tame, can't understand, can't always even explain. Clever as we are, evolved, modified, educated, progressed, whatever language you want to put over all of that, there's still huge gaps. There's still chaos that we can't explain. And especially now in the world, I don't think I'm going too far to say you can kind of see all of that chaos. People with big egos in power, with big armies, it's chaos. Volatile borders, everywhere you look, there's a volatile border, it's chaos. Trigger-happy generals, trigger-happy, angry teens, chaos. People down the street, out of control, chaos. Random diseases that we don't know about, can't control, chaos. Financial future, we don't know. Chaos. Even, and this is just my family, might not be yours, but even just family life can be like chaos sometimes, can't it? Just family life, just everyday, middle day Wednesday with everybody running about. It can be like chaos, and it can almost be like unmanageable chaos. I think chaos clouds everything. Whether you're in it or whether it's just there on the horizon, it affects how we see everything. So just the threat of war, have you noticed how that's cranked everything up? Have you noticed how that's affected stuff? We're not, I don't think we're at war yet. But the idea of there is wars in Europe and there is wars around the world, it just cranks up everything to the point that we change some of our decisions. You notice that the government have changed some of the things. They've spent money on some of the things they would have spent money on, they now spend it on something else. So I'm not trying to be political, I'm just trying to say it affects how we care for people and how we look after people. The idea of chaos, I think, is this idea of disorder. That's sort of the idea underneath it. So stuff gets disordered when chaos is on the horizon. Stuff we should put at the top of our priority list ends up going down the list because of the threat of chaos, just the fact that it's there. So maybe even the thought of somebody being out of control down your street, that level of chaos just means it affects how you live. It affects your liberties and your freedoms, and maybe even what you do with your kids, that kind of thing. It brushes, it covers over everything, and it clouds over everything. And it's hard when chaos is there, which I think that it is. It's hard to see anything else. It's hard to see what's true, what's right. And I think it's hard to imagine a world without it or a way through it sometimes. And what I would say is, here we are in the chaos. But this passage, I think, says something that we already know, that we already hope in, that chimes with our picture of home. It says, this text, it wasn't supposed to be like this. And, beautifully, it won't always be like this. And you might say, you've got to at least have a bit of a cynical head on, you've got to think about this stuff. You might say, that's kind of a nice notion, Ash. It's nice to think that that might be the case. And maybe even I kind of think that, but maybe I'm just telling myself that. Maybe that's just a nice story to soften the blow of the harshness of life. Can we really live like that's true? Can we live like all this chaos will be sorted out? I'm going to be honest with you about the North Sea. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat about this kind of stuff. When I see the chaos, it's a bit like when I see the North Sea. I go the other way. That's my whole strategy with the North Sea. I don't know how you get on. I was speaking to somebody before church who just says they're going for a swim in there. And I love the person that was telling me that, but I just think that's madness. It's the North Sea. There's people on oil rigs just a couple of miles down the road who've got like life warnings about, don't go in there, you'll just die. And yet we throw our kids in on the side of the coast, don't we? Get in there, have a swim about. It's madness. It's chaos, I think. All that will get me in, and I was wondering whether I should say all of this, and I'm going to say it all, is my ego. Or you might have noticed this is not just generally me, but anybody who's going to get in the sea, especially the North Sea, I think they've been caught short, or it's their ego. Those are the two things that get you in the sea. That's what I'm going to say. If you see a middle-aged man in the wading out, he's got other ideas about what he's going to be doing, I think. We run for it. We avoid it. Unless our ego or our need pulls us in. One of the things I love about Jesus, one of the things I think that marks him out as being special, has been different, has been somebody that we should follow, is unlike me, and I think unlike us. So read through the Gospels. Every time he sees chaos, every time he sees that the world is disordered, every time he sees something that is unordered and unexplainable and uncontrollable, when everybody else is going in the other direction, watch what Jesus does. Read through the Gospels, every single story, Jesus goes towards the chaos. He makes a beeline for it, and it's not his ego or his need that gets him there. It's ours. Whether it's a storm on the sea, a violent person, somebody who's infectiously ill and you shouldn't go near them, an immoral man on the street, an immoral man in power, read through the Gospels, Jesus makes a beeline for chaos. Why is that? I think he goes there, and this is our hope. He can go into the chaos because he knows what the chaos is. Read through the Gospels. The writers take real care over how they describe these stories. Jesus sees the chaos, he sees the chaotic situation, and he looks at it, and he's able to say, I know this storm. I know the start and the end of this storm. I know this disease. I know this guy. I know this mental health mess. I know the beginning and the end of all this. I can look at it and I can see it and I can say its name. I'm from the beginning. I exist until the end. I can look it in the eye. I can see all the way around it. I know exactly what that chaos is. And one of the things that Jesus says to us really strongly is, I see what that chaos is, I can name what that chaos is, and I know, and we see this as he goes to the cross, I know that its days are numbered. There's going to be an end to all this chaos, is what Jesus says. And as he encounters it on this earth, and as his disciples watch him encounter this, he sees it for what it is. He sees the chaos, and he says, it's sin, it's the curse, it's the mess. and it's not going to win. Its days are numbered, and I'm going to prove it to you. This is our hope. And it means that I think, and I don't say it glibly knowing how much of a scaredy cat I can be, is that it means that we can live with chaos. We can follow him like his disciples, and we can look it in the eye, and he can describe to us what it is, and we can see that its days are numbered. So I'm going to make the case that it's hard to take to the North Sea. I love the coast, I love the sea, but mostly I just like the sound of it. The North Sea. You know, when you're in there, something brushes past your leg. Cold bit of water, warm bit of water. You get out, don't you? You're like, what's that? I do anyway. I bolt out. I clear off out of the way. It's chaos. It's dark. It's cloudy. We've got no idea what it is. I had a breakthrough last week, and I'm not bragging when I say this. I've never swam in seas like this in my life. The stuff that should have been scary was like a joyous education. I was out in the deep, which I never go out in the deep. Even in swimming pools, I don't go into the deep. In the ocean, it's madness to go out into the deep. But I was out in the deep just sunbathing, just completely at peace. You couldn't get me on the land. And I noticed that people around me were also going out to the sea just for a bit of peace, into the chaos for a bit of peace. Why was that? Turned round, looked down, never seen a sea like it in my life. You look down, you could see straight through it. You could see absolutely everything. The sea was like it wasn't there. See the fish, see the ocean. Fish were like just gorgeous looking, just mesmerizing. Game changer. I was in the middle of the chaos, and yet I was completely at peace. And I think one of the wonderful things that Jesus does to us is he invites us down that path. So I'm still probably going to be a scaredy cat about the sea and about the chaos that comes. But when I look at it through Jesus' eyes, and I see him confront the chaos, and I see him identify it and speak its name, then I've got some hope. So that's the first thing. We can see through the chaos. There's just two more things. He heals us at our core. So see in the text, verse 4. This is poetic language, and it's big language, and it's end times language. But it's really personal language. What it tells us about the end times and how things are going to go when we meet God has an incredible personal notion to it. He will wipe every tear from our eyes. So this promise isn't just an end to the chaos in the world. This promise is an end to the chaos deep within us. I think that's what the promise is. It's not a generic public promise. It's a personal promise. It's an intimate promise. I'm going to wipe all of the tears, and it's still poetic, and it's still using imagery. I don't know if God's going to get a tissue out, but he is going to deal with us in a way that brings us peace in an incredibly intimate way. I would reckon that you will have brought comfort to quite a few people in your life. There's probably a group of people out there who you will have helped, and you'll have said to them, "Are you okay? Let me stay with you while you're okay. Let me look after you." There'll be quite a big pool of people that you'll have done that kind of thing with. I would guess, I'd be fairly sure that the group of people for whom you've wiped away tears would be really small. The people who you've wiped away tears, for me, it's a couple of people, and it's people that I love deeply, and I know really well, and I want to be there for always. And when God speaks to us about how he's going to help us with the chaos, he says, in the end, I'm going to wipe away all of your tears. Another quote, and this author is unknown, and there's quite a few people cited this. Refugees have a desire not only for shelter, but for their pain to be known. So the idea of the hurt of a refugee is not just that they want to get somewhere, although I'm sure that's a big part of it, it's they want their story to be known. I think the desire to be comforted at that level, I really connect with that. I think the desire to be comforted at that level connects with all of us. As pilgrims, which is how I would describe us, we have that too. And I think the idea in the text is a bit like, do you know the idea of a good cry? Do you know that notion of a good, it's an odd expression, isn't it? But you kind of understand what I'm talking about when I say a good cry. So let me explain what a good cry is. You know, some people, so I've been both the good crier and the recipient of a good cry. So you've got the tears that you're ready to cry, you're ready to blubber, as it were. You've got stuff that's upset you, and you're ready with those tears. But you hold them back because of the environment that you're in or the people that you're around. You can't release all of that emotion at that point. You hold on to the tears until you have somebody around you who is safe and who loves you and can help you with the tears that you're going to shed. I don't know if you've ever had a good cry like that. You've held them all in, and then you've reached a point in the day where you're in the arms of somebody you know loves you and you know can help you with what you're going through, and then you cry. And you cry at that point because you put your trust into the arms of the person that can look after you. I'm guessing that there's a lot of people in here saying, "You've got me wrong, Ash, I never cry. I don't need to cry. It's you. Toughen up, man." I would say they're either lying or they've got a good cry coming. Here's the picture, I think, that God's given us. One day, there is a day coming after a lifetime of us trying to hold back tears, after a lifetime of struggle, of wondering whether we can cry now, wondering whether we can let it all out now. This is the picture that we're given. One day, we will sit in the lap of a good Father, and He will be able to wipe away, because He knows us, because He loves us, because He can sustain us, all of our tears in a final kind of a way. The biggest good cry, perhaps, you could maybe think of it like that you can ever imagine. Because we will be in the hands of our Creator and our Father who loves us. And there will be no more tears. Here's the comfort, I think, that we get in the chaos that we might be in now. We can know that grief doesn't hold the final word. None of our sorrow, none of our tears are unseen or can't be helped. So what I'd say about that is that's a really great promise. I think it's worth knowing. It can be a game changer for us if we can actually live it. But who can live that? Who can rest on that comfort that one day all the tears will be wiped away so we can just live inside of that? It's a heck of a calling. Again, I look at Jesus, and yes, He helps people with their immediate needs, but when you watch what He actually does, what His concern is, He can help people, He can give them food, He can feed the hungry, He can provide shelter, He can do all of that kind of stuff, all of the need. But Jesus always prioritizes the real need. Even when it's at the expense of what His followers expect of Him. He looks into the hearts of people. He deals with their core problems, even when they come with a very visceral. He will do that because that's ultimately exactly what we really need. We really need for our story to be known and for us to be shown love right at the core of us. I think the idea that the mighty God that we think about will physically wipe away all of our tears is almost implausible. When we think about God in His vastness and His greatness, it's just like, really, I don't know that I can trust Him for that. And then we look at Jesus and we spend 5 minutes reading through a passage of Jesus, and it's hard to imagine that that's not the first thing that He's going to do when we get to heaven. He will wipe away all of our tears. Last thing, He gives us capacity to overcome and to inherit. Verse 7 says, "He who is victorious, he who," so other translations put it, overcomes. "He who overcomes will inherit all this, And as far as I can read the text, John is having a vision of heaven. And I think that's what it is. You'll inherit all of what he can see. And verse 6 says, "To the thirsty, I'll give water without cost from the spring of the water of life." So hold those two verses, verses 6 and 7. And my guess would be that 6 is the key to understanding 7. 6 is where the logic for grasping verse 7 lasts. So it's finished. He's the Alpha and the Omega. Do you see it? He's done the cross. He's at the beginning of creation. He's at the end of all things. He's at the bookends of all of human life. He's done it all. That's the message there in verse 6. He's done everything. There's almost naught for us to do. We don't do the stuff. We need to know that he did all of the stuff. That's the logic of verse 6. We don't get to do all of the stuff. We've got to know that he did all of the stuff. It's that grace that saves us. That's the foundation of our being victorious, knowing that he does everything. So it's not about us being strong, and it's not like a triumphant sort of idea. It's more like the idea of perseverance. The word for victorious is nikau. And it's not about being a hero. It's about enduring in Christ. That's the nature of that victory. So there's another passage in Revelation 12, if you want to know that I'm not just making it up, where it uses the same word. And it says, Revelation 12:11, "They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." It's not about strength. It's about holding on to Jesus. Verse 7's not a reward for the strongest. It's a promise for those who know that they are thirsty. It's not about the strongest. It's about the thirstiest. It's not about how strong you can make yourself for this world. It's about how much you realize you need another drink of water. It's about being thirsty. That is what it is to overcome. You're not going to be strong enough, but you need to know that you can be thirsty enough. So I think it's a countercultural message. It's not how much you can beat back the chaos. That's the wisdom. It's not about how strong you can be in the face of the chaos, although you'll need to be strong in the face of the chaos, but how much you realize in the face of the chaos that you need Jesus. When you see the wars, when you see the illnesses, when you see all of the stuff that we just can't control, and you sort of puff your chest out, which you probably need to do a wee bit in this world, it's not actually about that. It's about realizing that when faced with all of that, boy, do we need something different from this world. And maybe you disagree with that, but what I would say to you is look around at the world that we live in. Do we need people to show any more strength? Do we need to be stronger, have better weapons, have anything else like that? Or do we need people to recognize that we are thirsty? I think we need to recognize that we are thirsty. Viktor Frankl said, I think we've got this quote. Yeah, we do. What is to give life must endure burning. So this guy endures the Holocaust and writes about happiness. Anyone that endures the Holocaust writes about happiness. You want to listen to them. You want to hang on every word that they say. What it is to give life must endure burning. He echoes here what Peter says, I think, as Peter writes. To overcome is not to avoid the fire of life. To overcome is to be refined within it. Can we really be at leisure when we're in chaos? Can we really be at leisure when we see chaos just over the border or around the corner? Here's what I think we can learn from Frankl. We can't always avoid chaos. We will try forever and run away from it, but we can't always avoid the chaos, but we can always have a purpose in it. I think that's what Frankl realized as he was being beaten to a pulp or whatever was happening with him. We can always have meaning. We can always have hope. We can always have a purpose. And I think that in the middle of the chaos is miraculously still where the leisure can be. I don't know if you'd be happy to call that leisure, but I think when we're in the chaos, that's where it is. It's in recognizing that we really need Christ in all of this. You want to be at leisure? 3 things to remember. What do you see when you look out at all the chaos going on? What do you see when you look out at all that? Jesus says it's cursed. It's chaos, but it's cursed in its sin and its days are numbered. Remember that. Does it all feel worthless, this life? Does it all feel worthless? The Bible says it's not. Everything is seen. Everything is cured, including the very depths of you. Do you think you can keep going? Think you should just pack it in and give up? Counterculturally, this passage says, forget strength. What you really need is living water.